Hello, my name is Carson Kirchner, and this is the second article review for Psychology of Music. The article I chose was Effects of Metrical Encoding on Melody Recognition from the journal Music Perception. Within this article, there were two studies that were put into focus, all under the same focus and idea of determining whether matched metrical and motivic structures have an effect on the recognition of melodic patterns, and if recognition is enhanced and facilitated by repetition. Within the two experiments, they both consisted of the same melodic materials, but the conditions and procedures differed very slightly. In the first experiment, they tested recognition memory for motives by altering the pitch in the second presentation and only play the melodies 2 times. In the second experiment, they had the same procedures and conditions, the only difference being that the original melodies were played multiple times prior to the start of the experiment in order to establish repetition. With the first experiment, the methods consisted of participants being drawn from musical experts and novice listeners. The metrical structures were established in the trials by an ongoing metronome clip going on through the playing of the melodies. The two metrical structures used were to match about a 3/2 time signature, which matched with the 4-note motive, and a 12/8 time signature, which matched with the 3-note motive. And the motivic and metrical structures were crossed, which either matched or mismatched the structures. So a 4-note motive could be paired with the 12/8 time signature and vice versa. There were 8 different tonal melodies that were created. 4 were using 3-note motives, and the other 4 were created using 4-note motives. The procedure for the first experiment consisted of having each trial presenting the melodies 2 times. The second presentation was either an exact repeat of the first presentation, and this occurred in half of the trials, or it contained a single pitch change, which only occurred on an unaccented note position for both metrical structures, and it was never changed more than a second. And it went with the contour, the same contour as the original melody. This created 16 melodic stimuli, and each was paired with one of the 2 metrical structures, as I said before. The participants were asked to identify if the second presentation of the melody was different or the same. The results from this experiment showed that expert listeners showed a greater sensitivity to pitch change when the metrical context matched the motivic pattern than when they conflicted, and this is an effect of metrical encoding. Novice listeners showed a lower sensitivity to the pitch changes and showed no effective metrical encoding and leaned with a bias towards saying the melodies were played the same, even if they differed. These results also show that recognition memory among the expert listeners was influenced by a match between meter and motive, while the novices had no effect. The methods and procedure of experiment 2, as I said before, were virtually the same as the first experiment. However, all of the participants in this experiment were novices with little to no experience with musical training. And again, as I said before, the only difference in the conditions is that the subjects heard the original melody 4 times prior to the start of the 2 compared presentations. The results from this experiment showed that repeated presentations of the metrical and motivic patterns increased sensitivity among the novice listeners and suggested an effect of metrical encoding that was not present for the trials of novice listeners in the first experiment. When comparing the 2 experiments, the differences in the results for the novice listeners is suggested to be influenced by the difference in strategy of the conditions and procedures. And when the meter matches a motivic structure, 4-note or 3-note motives, variances are more easily identified and the original versions are more easily recognized and remembered. Thank you for listening.